Hello, fellow audience and internet. How's it going? Welcome to Archetype, sponsored by Lenovo and AMD. It's me, your host, Ashley, and we are here on a Tuesday, like usual, working on the very last episode of this monster archetype. Which, to be honest, I don't know if he's really that scary. I think he's kind of cool. We're kind of labeling him as a monster, but he's just another creature. So yeah, if you joined me last stream, we know what a crazy mess that was, wasn't it? Oh my goodness, ZBrush wanted to crash on me every moment it could possibly get. But yeah, so I went ahead and redid the work that I did last time, and fixed up all of his scales and things like that, and then kind of put in some Polypaint, but I think we're going to change the Polypaint in the beginning of the stream, and we're going to go for something maybe a little more colorful. I was looking at some cactus flower stuff, and I think that could be kind of fun. So we're going to do that. Also, if you hear dogs barking and I have to leave to take care of that, don't worry, I'm not going to leave you forever. I will be back. I just don't have my other half with me this week, so I have to make sure that my dogs are not being little buttholes while I stream. So, but hopefully it'll be okay. But yeah, if you see dogs running in and out, that's why. So, yes, we're going to go ahead and polypaint this thing, and then we're going to get into posing it. I think I'm going to go with one of my sketches that we did in the very beginning of the week, which was this pose of him going up and kind of like coming around on a rock. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the process of, making that, and we'll add the extra sculpting details and make him kind of growl and do fun stuff. So I like that pose, so I think we're going to go with that one. The one where he's like got a little mouse is kind of fun too, but yeah, I think we're going to do this one, and then we'll sculpt like a really quick little rock in there to go with it. So, but first I'm going to kind of play with maybe some of these colors. And see if I like it. And in ZBrush, it's actually pretty easy to do that. We can also, if you're in the chat, say hi. I like people saying hi. All I have are dogs surrounding me, so it would be nice to see a friendly hello. But if we go to Polypaint, and we have, one of our meshes selected here, we can go to adjust colors, which is pretty cool. And then we get this little window that pops up, and we can color pick these colors, and we can change them. So if I click and drag over on this color, you'll see that it turns on, and then I should be able to start shifting hues and intensities to stuff. So you can see I can switch around this stuff, and I can up the saturation. Whoa, it doesn't get crazy. Oh my goodness. I think part of that's because of the weird masking or coloring, probably, what's going on, but we might be able to adjust the tolerance level of that. And see what's happening there. Usually it does not do this weird crazy fractaling for something so simple, but we'll see. Looks like if I go a little too crazy, probably because there's not that much color to play with, it kind of loses its mind on the color, but that's not really a big deal. I can still pick the color that I kind of want, and you can still say, okay, and we can just paint this over. It's really just to get kind of like an idea of a color that looks good, but if this actually sticks, let's see if it does. Yeah, it does. So we can now just color pick these things and make sure that all that stuff is good. Synth, happy Tuesday. It's going. Having a good time. Painting up a big cactus cat. I'm going to go ahead and I like using the square brush for poly painting and changing the focal shift. So we'll pick that one. And we'll go ahead and start painting out this crazy fractaling that's going on. But yeah, I just felt like the brown was pretty boring. And since our creature, I think, can be more exciting than that. I want to do a more fun and interesting Polypaint. Hi, Kevin. Hi, Philip. Synth, I was joking that since you weren't here last week, or at least I didn't think you were, ZBrush decided to crash on me multiple times. I lost all my work. So I think it's official that you're a good luck charm for this stream. Because you're like our leading audience mascot. So from now on, you're not allowed to leave me alone, apparently. Because ZBrush will just crash. So Synth apparently can control my ZBrush and didn't want me to succeed yesterday or last week. ZBrush was against me. It was very, very evil last week, so hopefully we will not have that same issue this week. But I redid all the work and I did all the good stuff, so we should be fine. It wasn't too much work to redo or anything, but you know, losing work's never fun. And but we're back on track and doing just fine now. So hopefully now that Synth's here, he'll be a good luck charm, and that won't happen to me this week. At least that's kind of the goal. I kind of like the little dot dippling that this accidental fractal was kind of doing. This like fragmenting. So I think I actually want to not keep it, but I kind of like, because it kind of felt like a cactus where it's got kind of like these little pimply type things. Ooh, picking up a new PC, fancy. Yeah, I think I'm gonna add some of that dotting, but I like to start with just basic kind of like gradients across the body to get like a good read on stuff. And usually I like to make things darker at the end, or things like the paws, like making the top of the paws. Turn off lazy mouse, we color faster. Things like top of the paws, maybe a little darker. It's okay that you missed the one show. You just can't let it happen again because ZBrush was on a rampage. But it's okay now. So yeah, so I just like to darken some of these areas. It's really common in animals to have a darker top and a lighter bottom. Part of that, especially in something like sea life, but you see it in everywhere, but something like sea life is really important because when you look at a creature from the bottom, it's supposed to kind of blend in with the sun. And then looking at it from the top down, you kind of blend in with the darkness of the water, right? So it's a pretty common thing. Again, if you're looking at something above you, usually it's going to be lighter because you're looking at the sun. So it blends in with the brightness of the sun. And then same thing when you're looking down. So birds and stuff also have this kind of similar thing. But a lot of animals do if you look at the animal kingdom. Isn't that right, little puppy? Hopefully my puppies will just relax and go to sleep. We'll see. Puppies never want to go to sleep at the time you want them to. They woke me up at 2 a.m. this morning, so. Cool, so we got that green. Go ahead and color pick this green. You can go ahead and fill in the head here as well. Tauntaun. Tauntaun's asking, what's your take on over-design? Do you think some monsters have too much wings, crazy tails? Where's the balance point? That's a good point. I think a lot of it has to do with what you're designing for. You know, a game like Monster Hunter, people want these like really crazy, over-the-top, crazy monster iterations and designs. But if you're doing something that's maybe more in the realms of, you know, realism or something maybe like Star Wars where it's kind of more familiar shapes or something like that, then you're going to get something a little different. I don't really know if there's, obviously there's a thing as over-designing something. But I think it's more about making sure you're not over-designing in the context of what you're creating for. Because for something like Monster Hunter, I think it's really hard to over-design, you know, in Monster Hunter, just because they do have really crazy shapes and wings, and their proportions are really nuts, and it makes the game super fun. That's why people play that game. Whereas something, yeah, or something like Godzilla, I'm a huge fan of all the Godzilla monsters, so, you know, Gigan and Megalon, you know, Gigan's got the big buzzsaw in the middle of his chest, and Megalon's got drills for arms. And while it doesn't really make much sense, and it may seem a little ridiculous, I think for what that is, it's really suiting. So, yeah, I think it's more about knowing what your criteria is and knowing how to, you know, kind of battle against that. Also to note, this carapace and shell, they're still nanomesh, and we're going to keep them that way, so when we pose our character, we don't have to worry about all these shells. So also with that, it becomes really easy to change the color, which I like a lot. So I think I want to try to go for like a red. But yeah. It's definitely a weird creature design, can be super weird in that way, about like balancing like what's realistic versus what's just fun or what's interesting. And you know, that's something that I think we constantly fight with as artists in general, is finding that balance. Because sometimes we do want to go really crazy, but also depending on, you know, what you're working for, it just might not be kind of what the doctor ordered. Yeah, I think the red plus green will be way more fun. The brown was not very interesting in my opinion. We'll have to think of more fun ways too. I also have to do it to each side, because Nanomesh doesn't like you apparently, and yeah, so we gotta edit each of these, but it's no big deal. We've got time. And eventually later on too, we can add varying colors and stuff to this if you want. Nice. The only good thing about the split screen is I can color pick from the one that I already colored, so that's kind of a nice little thing. I kind of like the darker one, so I think we'll go back to the other one and go ahead and edit that one and color pick from that, and then kind of add that into it as well. I like this more saturated red too. That's kind of nice. Yeah, I think this is going to be more fun for sure. Was it realistic that, you know, again, when we talk about like designing and stuff, is it realistic that he would be colored like a cactus? Probably not. You know, there are some things that mimic nature or mimic other things, but a lot of those usually tend to be something that's, you know, bottom of the food chain, or you know, prey animal types. But again, we can always, it's important to know that rule, or to know, you know, what the normal is, and then understand that you're breaking it. If you're just doing it because you don't know any better, then that's kind of different, right? But knowing that you're breaking a rule to make something more unique or interesting is totally fine. Did I accidentally just fill that object just before? That's fine. I'm silly. Speaking of, in the chat, go ahead and maybe mention your favorite monster design while we're at it, since we're designing monsters. I'm very curious to see what everybody's favorites are. Comics Legends on YouTube is asking, what advice would I give to an upcoming artist to hear about all the massive layoffs in tech and the entertainment industry? I wouldn't say it's something that, not that you shouldn't be worried about layoffs. Layoffs are really important to like keep tabs on, but I don't think that should be a worry as far as should or shouldn't you, you know, pursue that in the career, because I think there's layoffs in every industry. It's just a part of having kind of just having a job. There's plenty of really I mean, there are talented artists that do get laid off, but I think if you are really talented and very much needed and valuable, you will find a place, you know. But yeah, that's always a really tricky subject to talk about for sure, because everyone's going to have a very different opinion as to how to approach that stuff. But I don't think that should mean, you know, don't do something or don't approach something. I think the biggest thing to take away from it is just to be very conscious and prepared about, you know, if you could lose your job. It's really common actually in the entertainment industry, like especially in film, because there's kind of seasons for films. It's actually super common to get laid off during a season and then come back later when, you know, blockbuster movies are being remade, and you know, so there's normal seasons and stuff as well, which you have to just take into account, you know, save your money or do some freelance or commission or other stuff as well. There's other ways to kind of work around the layoff world, but yeah. Sorry if that wasn't much of help, but that's kind of my advice. Cinda's asking about the dual window. There is a button. I think it's in preferences. You can Google split screen. It's honestly not that helpful. It only does it because I'm using Nanomesh and doing the edit mesh, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's overly helpful because you can't change, for example, when I click on, you know, the next thing I'm going to color, when I say edit mesh and split screens, you can see I can't even go over here and look at what I'm going to be coloring without losing sight of this one. So they move in tandem. So it's actually not that helpful of a window. It's helpful for color picking, you know, in this case, but for other scenarios, split screen's it's not that helpful. Sorry, ZBrush. But yeah. Angel on Twitch is saying she loves Shin Godzilla. I gotta agree with you. It's pretty good. I love that design too. It's always really cool to see, you know, what our interpretation, like the American version, is versus the Japanese reboot of Godzilla, and I love the contrast between the two. I think it's a lot of fun to see where they want to take it and like how they want to reboot it versus like what we do. Super, super cool. So yeah, I totally agree there. And then the angels from Evangelion are pretty awesome. That's a pretty classic one, right? I don't think there's a lot of people that would say they don't like that version of monsters. I love the robots in that too. And you can almost argue the robots are just as monstrous as the angels are. I think they're kind of monster designs more than they are mech designs. They're so organic. I'm trying to think of some of my favorites. You mentioned definitely, like, Godzilla's always been up there for me. I love Godzilla. I also love the Thing, even though technically the Thing doesn't really have a thing design because it's the Thing. But I love the idea of the creature, right? It's not always sometimes about the exact look. And I think my dogs need to go possibly outside. Let me check real quick, and I will be right back. Pause and look at this beautiful cactus cat. Okay, I'm back. there's a seal outside, and my dogs want to desperately go out there and say hello to the seal. And their version of hello is barking at it incessantly, so I cannot cannot let them go out there. But they keep ringing the bell to want to go out. There we go. Yeah, I accidentally hit filled object when I said edit mesh, so there we go. Starting to get color. That's fun. That's way more fun than what we had before, so. I said my favorite monster designs. I mentioned The Thing. I like The Thing. I mentioned Godzilla. Somebody else also mentioned Godzilla, and I do love Godzilla's a great one. I think all the monsters from the original show, I would say, are my favorite. Like, I love Gigan, and I just love the ridiculousness. You know, Space Godzilla's awesome. I just think they were so weird and creative. So, Cthulhu's depictions are always really fun too. I love the movie Jaws. Again, if we're talking about like a monster, I know they're designing basically a shark, but still super cool, and it's one of my favorite movies. A cool creature design is also, if you guys have seen the movie Edge of Tomorrow with Emily Blunt and Tom Cruise and stuff. I won't spoil the movie if you haven't seen it, but there's some really cool creature work in that I really enjoy a lot. Super, super original designs. Ooh, favorite monster is the Fly. Classic. Fly's good. Yeah, I love the Fly. That's just a good movie too. That's just a good, solid movie. Predator is also a classic one. I mean, I work at a studio that we make aliens, so Xenomorph is another pretty close one to the heart. You know, if we all grew up watching the Alien Queen and the Xenomorph and stuff, it's a pretty iconic design now. Ooh, the kaijus from Pacific Rim. Those ones are pretty cool. I do like the kaijus. Brings you back to the good old, you know, I mean, kaiju is classic, you know, Japanese monster, right? Doesn't get much better than that. Ooh, Shadow of Colossus. That's an interesting one. Yeah, there's definitely some really cool stuff in there. I didn't even think about. Man, now you got me thinking about like game stuff. I'm not even sure. So because he's red at the top, I think I want to try to blend these up here. So I'll definitely color pick this and start kind of blending the darker colors here. Just so we can start getting something that feels a little more cohesive within here. Red and green's a really interesting color complement to do. This is actually way more fun than our like boring gray color here that we had before. And I might be able to incorporate some like cool striping, or maybe I was thinking maybe some spotting of red, or like dappling that goes across his body. I think that could be kind of fun. So we'll play with that. The Rat King from Last of Us 2. I don't know if I got that far. It doesn't sound familiar, but I'm sure it was cool. Their creature stuff was always really fun. Like the clickers are really terrifying to play against. Game mechanic wise, they're a lot of fun. Hi, little puppies. Those are my little puppies. Come up here. Come hang out with me while I stream. She desperately wants to go outside because of the seal. Let's go see the other water puppy. Yeah, I don't think stripes are the answer. I think it's going to be like some dappling. So I can change this alpha to, you know, some spots and then do like a spray, and we can do some color spray across here. Just to get a better blend, I think definitely works. Comics asking if I do colors on a layer. I don't, just because it's so easy to change colors after the fact and stuff in Polypaint, and I don't usually have reason to do it. Polypaint's not usually your first like final texturing phase. If I was gonna do actual textures, it would be in a different program. So no, I usually don't. Angel's asking what made me interested in creating creatures in 3D art. Also, what advice do you have for beginners? I think my advice for beginners is just to study a lot of animal work and stuff. If you're looking to do creature design, especially, I think it's super important to, you know, base off of things that are existing and current, things that can actually exist to help you kind of motivate and drive your fantastical creature designs. But I initially got in because I do love just creatures. I was a big fan of Steve Irwin, and I loved just animal anatomy and creatures and stuff. And I wanted to be a biologist or a zoologist or something like that in the beginning. And then, hold on, I'm gonna have to go take my dogs out real quick. But then after that, you know, I kind of married the two and was able to do character and creature design. But I'll continue that point 1 second. I'm sorry, guys. Let me go check on dogs. Hi, folks. Sorry. Little break. Dogs had to go. But anyway, as I was talking about, we're almost done coloring this dude. I'm trying to think of other things that we could do to this guy to make his colors more interesting. But we can always add that later too. Yeah, for creating creatures and stuff, I think it really was just my love of animals and animal design and, you know, drawing. And I didn't really know to marry the two for a long time. Took me a long time to realize that I could marry the idea of doing, you know, creature work along with, you know, my love for animals. And I didn't really know that the job existed until I discovered Tara Whitlash, who does anatomical, like scientific drawings for like paleontological studies of like dinosaurs and stuff. But she's also done creature designs for things like Star Wars and stuff too. So that was also really cool to see kind of like the marriage of the two. And it wasn't until I realized that it was something that you can kind of, you know, make a living doing. It's like making cool monsters and stuff. So, yeah, and to this day, I still, I mean, obviously, I don't know if this is your first time joining in, but as a reminder to people who are, I still draw. I draw all the time. Every beginning episode of a new creature or character, we always start with drawings. And so I think, you know, if you're looking to get into 3D, you know, I don't know what kind of beginner advice you're looking for, whether it's getting into 3D or just beginner artist, but I don't think drawing fundamentals are ever a bad place to start, because all those fundamentals of design and color theory and anatomy and stuff will always transfer over into any medium that you do. You know, whether you stick with traditional drawing or whether you go into 3D or whatever it is. I do 3D for the most part as a living, but I draw a lot for my job as well. And it all kind of comes back around together, so it's really cool. Oh, I didn't have it selected. I was like, why isn't that thing working? There we go. I am adding like some slight striping, just a little bit to kind of blend. Nothing too crazy. I don't want to add like tiger stripes. I just kind of want to add little blend points between the light and dark areas. And then I think I want to add some basically like little spotting. And by spotting, I mean, you know, grabbing this red and just kind of break it up a bit more. There we go. Yeah, that's looking more fun. I also did a little bit of striping, or kind of like a striping gradient kind of thing up the legs. I think it's kind of fun. Just to have, it, again, it's just more of like to have some visual interest on the characters, so there's a bit more of like a flow. Might be able to also, what I'm thinking is, because there's, you know, this this plating. I'm wondering if we can do something where maybe we actually sculpt a little bit while also painting, so we get a bit more of a bump. So it's almost like this tiny little plating that kind of goes on the other underside of this. again, just trying to find some ways to give some breakup. I think in reality, what we'll do also is I'm going to do this, but I would also, once we make this nanomesh not nanomesh anymore, we can take some of these and duplicate them and make them slightly smaller and kind of scatter them a little bit, so that way it has a more interesting kind of fall off, right? Because right now it feels very linear and geometrical because it is. It's based off of, nanomeshes and stuff. So, later on I want to kind of mess it up a little bit and make it feel a bit more organic. So maybe put some shells in between there. But for now, we can just kind of do something like this to kind of help sell the idea of it. And we can get into, I think we can get into posing pretty soon here. I'm gonna play with one more idea, which is, I don't know if you'll really be able to tell, but I'm gonna paint his little pads. I was debating on whether to do like a red gradient that goes up, but I think it's just gonna look like he has bloody paws. More than it looking like he's got patterning. So we can, if I wanted more red or something, I would just add more plating. So if we wanted to, we could add like maybe plating that goes down the side of his shins, or somewhere here, or maybe it goes down his elbow. We can always add more plating later if we want to, but I think for now, I think this is looking pretty okay. So. And we'll get into posing here. Now I'm going to cheat for posing. Character artist cheating? What? How dare I? Ooh, I know one last thing I want to do. I'm going to add a little red. It's got like mascara type thing. Almost. It'd be kind of fun. I also think the color of the eye needs to change. And I'm thinking, I don't know, I think maybe like a purplish color or something I think would be kind of cool. So I like to start with the darker purple, and then I'll add it a little lighter and kind of keep it in the pupil, and then add a little lighter. And if you wanted to, I'm not sure if I wanted to keep the eye like this. Ooh, if I accidentally only did one side. He's got dual eye colors. That's kind of fun. Then you can add like the iris if you wanted to, I think he'll look a little silly if he's got to have his eyes facing forward for one thing. That would definitely help. They would look kind of more like that. The secret to making sure that characters look like their eye is facing forward is make them slightly cross-eyed, and it's better. If you have them be slightly outwards, it looks really derpy and kind of silly. So. Even that still looks a little. Oh, I keep not having symmetry on. That's why. That's getting a little better, but you can always go in here and you can rotate the eyeball a little bit more. Make sure it feels like it's more forward-facing. I'm not sure if I want the pupil yet or not, though. We'll see. I thought it was kind of cool when he had like a... No eye is always kind of a cool eye. It's pretty tropey, but it's fun. But yeah, to make the eye feel like it's really sitting in there, I like to kind of put in a nice little shadow, just to give it a bit more life. Eyes make a big difference when it comes to your creature work. Cool. And I think that's feeling okay. Obviously, there's a lot more we could do with this. I wanted to be slightly farther than we are now, but, ZBrush was really mean last week, so that's just, it is what it is, which is okay. But I think now we could kind of get into doing some posing. So, I mentioned that I was going to cheat, and I am, because when we go to Tpose, we want him, we're going to do this pose, this pose here where he's kind of, coming down from like a rock. But here's the secret. So I'm not going to sculpt the rock first. I'm going to pose him first, and then we'll mangle the rock to fit where his feet are. Just because it's way easier to deal with. You don't always get to do that. Depends on like what you're doing. You know, if I worked on sideshow collectibles before, where you work on a base and you have to fit the creature to the base. But it's a way bigger pain in the butt to do it that way. So we're gonna, because it's kind of our own thing and we can take our own liberties with it, we're gonna go ahead and do that instead. So I'm gonna save. It's super important first. Let's save our work. And then now let's get into some posing. I don't think this pose will take me too long, so we'll see what happens. Now we could do this pose. We could also do another pose, like a running pose probably wouldn't take too long either. If we want to do a running pose and then put him with our character who's also running, we might be able to do that in one session. I have a feeling that this isn't going to take me too long to pose, because as you can see, I don't have to pose the nanomesh. So right now, these are all just separate little squares that I did to place all the little plates. So, and whatever we do here will translate back, and then nanomesh will place it on top. So it's actually a really nice way to adjust work. And you can see everything's nice and low res. There's nothing super high res in here. And also, if I go ahead and select its body and I say auto group, we already have our group split off into basically posable, sections, which is why I like for stuff like this, it's way easier just to grab this forearm and like rotate it and move it around. So with that being said, I'm going to kind of, I want to kind of picture the rock. So not Dwayne Johnson, but just the rock, So in reality, I'm thinking I want, this rock, and there's maybe going to be like a little ledge that he'll put his foot down onto, and then he'll be curving up and over it, right? So his head in the reference was here, and he'll be kind of like curling around it, and maybe his tail will come this way. And the other one, I had it go the other way. But we'll see flow-wise with the pose, like which way the tail can go. Now that's a good thing to actually bring up, is the flow in a 2D design can be very different from the flow of a 3D sculpt or like a pose. So I have it where, if you read the flow of this, it's coming up and around, going down to the rock, and then out again to the cave, and that brings you right back to right to the tail, and that brings you back to the face. But if I was to have this come down and then have the tail go this way, it'd be okay. But this is a much tighter, simpler composition that kind of keeps your eye focused like right here. Whereas this might be in a 3D space when we're trying to figure out, how this character's wrapping all the way around the rock. It might be a little awkward to have the tail go the other way to try to fit this same silhouette. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind, that a 2D composition is very different from a 3D composition. And sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't. And that kind of segues into the question that Comics Legend is asking, which is this the same approach that I take for doing collectibles? And do I get the creature design approved in symmetry before posing? And the answer is yes. So everything that you do, you first should do in symmetry to get everything nice and accurate and approved. And then what I would do is I'd actually usually rig the characters, which is why I, again, like this method, because I could just quickly weight paint all this stuff onto a rig. And then I could do a bunch of iterations of poses and then send those off in a turntable to Sideshow. And then they can pick and choose which one they like the best. And then I can take that one and actually do the official posing with the high res in ZBrush. So for this, I think it'll be easier. I kind of like, for stuff like this, when I'm picturing where stuff is, I kind of like to try to get an angle of like where the head I feel like is gonna be, and then kind of base that stuff around that. So I'll grab. So I'll start with trying to get like the general flow of the body first, and then I can move all the limbs after the fact. Oops. Thank you. Okay. So I want to get that arch in the back, and this is kind of where you can move stuff around and kind of fudge stuff for the sake of making the pose look cool. I also think we want some twist into that pose as well. So we get some squash and stretch as well. And this is what I'm talking about, you know, if I want some nice squash and stretch and stuff, it makes more sense for the tail to maybe flow this way instead of going the other way, like what my sculpt would be or what my drawing was. So we'll see, but that's just my gut instinct at first. But yeah, this approach is, how I'm posing right now is the same approach that I used when working on Sideshow collectible stuff. So it works. It's a tried and true method. I modeled and posed the alien mythos this way, the alien queen, Iron Man, Boba Fett. So yeah, it definitely works. I'm also going to go ahead and grab his arm here. And you can see I made his torso, which I didn't think I did, but I guess I did. It's his torso's one big mesh, but that's fine. I can just mask this off because I know where the rotation is of, you know, the shoulder. And then I'll mask the rest of that. We get something like that. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. And then I can mask right here as well. So remember, there's the scapula and then there's the humerus. So actually the thing that stretches a lot that we kind of maybe doesn't look like wood is that tricep area. So this part actually can stretch. And you can see all this craziness that's happening. That's totally fine. We can either mask it and kind of smooth it out and adjust it later. And I'll even take big sections of this, and like I know that this gets stretched around quite a bit, right? So you can take a lot of liberties when it's all split up this way. Normally I think I would have something in the middle here and not have this stretch across, but that was just my bad not being able to, I didn't catch it, but that's okay. You'll see that we can sculpt over it and it'll look fine. I want to get that, and then I'll go ahead and take his torso along with the nanomesh that's here, and I'm going to grab his head. I'll probably just grab a little bit of these too, right? Oops. Oop. And mask the rest of this. Invert this. Now I want to mask also all this and mask most of this, and then do a little soft selecting. Right, and now I can bring this in, find that pivot point. I can turn his head. Right, my method looks crazy at first, but you know, just trust the process and be good. So yeah, there you go. Now we're starting to get, I'm trying to get that nice arch in the back. And once we kind of squash this one side up, I think this will look pretty cool. But yeah, you can move the head around and kind of maybe turn it. Because in reality, maybe I'm picturing like the camera angles like maybe down here or something. So we'll make sure that that's feeling pretty good. This is kind of the idea is, you know, where is that rock sitting? But there you go. And now I'm gonna grab these guys. I'll kind of pull this down, and then I'll grab this one and mask that. Pull that down. Oh, what happened to my foot? Look at that little toe just hanging out. Go back where you belong, over here somewhere. I'm adjusting some anatomy, and it's okay to kind of like push this stuff around because you got to remember our bodies are super organic, so you know what can stretch and move is totally fine. Obviously you can't do something where you're like, I want this arm longer, and like just make it longer because then it's gonna look really weird. But if you feel like, you know, maybe these muscles don't feel like they're the right silhouette, we can totally change that type of stuff to get this feeling, you know, like having a better curvature or something, you know, like maybe sticking out this wrist a bit more and pulling this stuff in. So we get like a feeling like he's putting a lot of weight down onto that wrist or something, right? Another thing too is I can mask this. I can probably turn that in a bit more, so it's a bit more turned. Or maybe something like that. Cool. Now let's take this dude. And now we're going to mask all this side. We're also going to mask this part here because what we're stretching and squishing up now is going to be tricep. So mask that, bring that back. I'm just going to make sure that I know where that humerus is and where the elbow is. You can kind of point like that. And now you get an idea of how this humerus would be functioning. Leslie is asking if my dogs react to other animals on the TV. It's funny that they're reacting to Mufatha's death, but no, I've had one incident where I've turned on you know, like the dog TV where there's like birds and stuff. They were very interested in that. They had a lot of fun watching, you know, birds do their thing, and that was pretty funny. They do hear. I was playing the game inside a little bit yesterday, and there's dogs in that game, and they bark, and so they were definitely like, where's the dog? What's going on? You know, they were very confused. So yeah. Just gonna make sure I'm masking all this stuff. And it's okay to really squish this stuff because that's what actually happens, right? Is this stuff gets super squished. I know it seems really squished, but just trust me. Once you smooth this out, and you can also invert it and smooth this out and move this around, you can start to get an idea of where that squish is going to happen. Right, so we want the idea of like a muscle stretching on one side, right, versus the idea of a muscle contracting on the other side. So that's a good thing that's happening. And also the pectoralis muscle, you know, one side stretching and one side getting contracted. Again, all good things. And there's going to be a little bit of funkiness or whatever there may be. A lot of it gets actually pretty chilled once you smooth it out into the final. So there we go. Now we're getting kind of the front. I'll do the same with the rear leg here. We can take the hips here, and we can mask like a little section of it. There we go. Just to get some mark here. And again, I'm not just snapping in like no man's land over here. I know the Great Trochanter is supposed to be somewhere around here. It's a little bit of like 3/4 back from where the hip to the end of the hip is. So I know it's about here, and it goes to the knee, right? So now I have my proper trajectory of where this knee bends. Whoops. I can go ahead and move that up. And again, if you get some crazy things like this, that's okay. I'm just going to smooth it out. And I'll push it down and, you know, kind of reorient where that contracting and squashing would actually happen. This is also a good example of how kind of like blend shapes are also created. Like this is kind of the work that you have to do is, you know, make sure that you know where all that stuff is happening. Ooh, Sin says he's been playing Hogwarts Legacy and Cyberpunk. I approve of Cyberpunk. I think Cyberpunk sounds super fun to play in Ultra HD awesomeness. I've not tried Harry Potter, and I probably won't. I'm just not a big like open world shoot ones at things fan. But hey, to each their own. As long as you're having fun with it. I guess Lord Luigi is smiling, so thank you. He also says he rigs. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but if you do, good on you, sir. It says it is Maya never fails to crash. Yeah, Maya's really the one thing Maya's really good at is crashing. It's really good at crashing. Again, I picture that it's kind of like stepping up and over a, you know, some sort of ledge, so we can do something like that, and then like that. We could even point these toes down a little bit too. And then we can also squish these up once we know where the rock will exactly be as well. That should be fun too. And I'm just fixing kind of like silhouette feels here. Now we're going to get a nice stretch on this side. You also see normally I would normally like auto group or group a lot of these things, but I'm pretty confident that most of the stuff that I'm moving, I'm going to move pretty much once. There's not a lot of stuff that's too hard to select. I'm not too worried about it. Move that back. Again, I'm not trying to move it to adjust like where bones are. I'm actually trying to move it back to where bones are and make sure that, again, the contracting is happening in the right spot. I'm also going to tuck that in a bit more. And that's kind of, again, the nice part about being able to work with this stuff all separately. And you'll see that when we do the bring it back, you know, kind of thing into Tpose, you won't really be able to tell what we did. Gonna arch all these a little bit more to feel like they're getting squished up against the rock, which we can always do and adjust later. But yeah. Rocket's feeling a little too big if I look at the arch of it. So I think what I want to do, maybe he can be kind of lifting this leg up. I'm wondering if that might be a thing. Otherwise, I think he might have to be both kind of like tucked, like both legs are tucked underneath him and not really stretched, which might work. Again, just trying to visualize what we're going for here. I definitely still want there to be some sort of like a slight stretch for sure, but I don't want it to get, I don't want it to look too awkward. So we'll see how this does. We can play with it later too. We can kind of adjust it later if we need to. Maybe there'll be like a little step that he can step onto. I'll just go ahead and squish that up for now. And then we'll go ahead and take tail. And there's other ways to pose tails really easily, but I'm just going to have to do it like this for now, which is kind of just softening. Slowly kind of moving. There you go. This is the tails are actually the one thing that's like way easier to rig and move in the rig than in ZBrush for sure. Oops. There we go. We can always smooth this stuff out a little bit later too. But you can also get to a point, and I'll do it in a second, where you don't have to be as strict with the tail. I like to kind of get something going, something like that. And then for the very end of the tail, you can just isolate this or mask all of this that you don't want to be moved. And then we can just go ham and like move this around like crazy if we want to give it like a lot of cool dynamic motion. I don't mind using the tail and like really playing with it later on because it doesn't really matter. It's just for the pose. I'm trying to think of. You know, maybe if I want to do a thing like rotate it, then I can kind of mask it and do something like that. But you can easily kind of like, quote unquote, mess up the tail and not really see too much of a consequence from it. It'll just look more dynamic. You can also do slight things, like if I take this whole pose and just kind of warp it this way, probably won't show. I'm just doing little things that I think can add to the whole sculpt. So for one thing, I think this could get pushed up more. I want like more bend here. It's really just important to maintain like the distance more than anything else, right? When like thinking about this stuff. We can squash that up even more. Yeah, that's looking pretty cool. Might be leaning a little bit too much, but pretty easy to fix. I like to push the curvature of it, and then if it gets like a little off balance or tilted, we can just change that after the fact. And now I'll go in here and just kind of make sure that I feel like all my hips and, you know, certain anatomical structures aren't getting too wonkified before bringing it back. Again, I can adjust this after, but it's more of like a little fail-safe for me of like, oh, let me just make sure I stretch this and nothing looks super, super out of place. And then, yeah. I'll also do stuff like, you know, if I want to see what this looks like when it's like super squished, I'd be like, oh yeah, maybe that will look a little better, right? So then I can, I'll push it really weirdly first, and then I'll come back and squish it even more. Yeah, maybe that feels a little better. And always just maintaining the distance in the elbow is going to be helpful. And then, you know, if this is the squishy side and not the stretch side, I want to make sure that all this feels like it's going to be squishing up against one another, which we can just sculpt in also once we transfer this back over. Adjust this curvature here. A little funky. Yeah, that's looking pretty cool. So I think now that I'm pretty happy with that, let's go ahead and... Ooh, actually, it might be easier to open the mouth now. These are all separate pieces. So I can just grab this whole section here. Make sure I'm kind of grabbing the right parts here. That looks pretty good. And I can snap it this way. That's easier to know where the hinge joint can be, right? Is knowing that it's like, I know it's back here and up in here, and then I can go ahead and open up that mouth. You can even do like a bit of like a crooked jaw or something. Sometimes that gives it a bit more personality. See what it looks like as a whole. Now you can make them talk. Blah, 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 blah. That's always fun. So we'll go ahead and extend that mouth open. We'll add a snarl or something on one side. So maybe that's the case. I'm trying to think. You snarl and you like roar. Which side? It's also helpful as a person, like do it and then try to feel like, oh, if I'm doing this and I'm snarling, then this lip also gets pulled down. So I'm gonna crooked his jaw the other way that I had. So that way it's a nice flow. Even though I'm not an animal, you can still, you can act like an animal. It's okay. I'm giving you permission. Cool. All right, let's do it. Let's transfer it back over, and then we can fix our sculpt a little bit. Let's see what we get. It's always fun to see with the colors. There we go. And we might have to adjust some nanomesh stuff, so we'll see. So you can see the nanomesh got a little funky, right? That's totally fine. We can look at these individual things and we can move them around. Remember, I really pushed the tail probably bigger than it was before. So there's a couple of things you can do. So now that they're spaced more, we could just go into Nanomesh and go to that tiling, right? And we could say, let's see, oops, say 2. And now we have double the amount that we had before, right? To continue. Look, sometimes, guys, I'm just really clever, okay? It's also giving us 2 up here, but I kind of like it. It's kind of cool. We could always also, you could just duplicate it and then fix it. So you could still have the same instance, and then you could just delete half of it and then duplicate it on the, I'll do that just to show you guys. So you can duplicate it. Right now I have 2. I'm going to go back to Nanomesh. Show the placement. I only want extra plates from like here. So then I'll just delete hidden. Still have my Nanomesh. Show the instances, and then I can turn this to 2. Right, which you can see here. And then I still have the other one that doesn't have the. So now I can go back to this one, right, which is the one that doesn't have the 2. Go to its Nanomesh. Show placement. And I can hide all those. And then just say delete hidden. And now I have 2. Right? Oh, I deleted too many. Probably good to see what you're doing. Yeah, there you go. And now I can delete hidden. And I can unshow that placement. Show placement. And now I'm back to where it was, but now I have double the amount in the tail than I did before, and now I can kind of adjust this stuff to fit accordingly. I hope that makes sense. Good little trick. Again, Nanomesh is super, super handy for things like this. Another thing you can do too is if this stuff's stretched too much, I can say show placement, and I could insert more edge loops. You can see they're all split. Well, I also still have symmetry on. My bad. But I can also just even this spacing out a little bit more if I need to, or make them bigger. I'm not going to worry about it too much, but I will make sure that this is the center line geo, I think. Oh no, it's on the side, so it's fine. This is the center line geo. This is that one. Yeah. So this is where you can go in and adjust this stuff a little bit more. Again, the tail's going to get a little more messy just because I stretched it so much, but it's not really. You can squish all this stuff back. Did I really have this whole thing? That doesn't seem right, but that's okay. I can get rid of these ones now. Maybe even these ones? Yeah. Because I don't need stuff taking up that. Comics Legend asking how would I deal with those scales for 3D printing? Ooh, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing when it comes to 3D, it depends on how big it is. But a lot of this honestly would probably get printed as one big giant like top carapace piece. And we would do our job to basically fill in all these gaps that you won't see. From a distance, when you look at it, if you don't see these gaps, we would just kind of like sculpt it and paint it in, and we'd probably print it as like multiple shapes. So like this top neck piece would probably all get cut off, and then maybe this hip section, and then maybe the tail up to here. But you'd have to make sure that you backfill certain things so that way it's moldable. At least for Legacy, it was really important that it needed to be able to get molded and casted. So, you know, that's one thing to definitely keep in mind. Oops. I divided it instead of duplicating it. Again, I'm going to delete all of this. Delete hidden, and then I'll trail this one to 2 so I get more. Oops. There we go. Get 2. And then I'll go back to this guy. It does get a little confusing, so just, you know, turn on your brain. Be like, okay, I got rid of this tail and then did this one and blah. Yeah, cool. So that's what we want. So delete hidden, and now we have those. And this one's sticking way out there, right? Having a good old time. So that's where we can bring all that stuff back in. Most of this you can't even tell when you hide the placement. It's really just a matter of making just minor adjustments and stuff. I like the music today. Feels really intense. Like the Boy Scouts. Get it? Kevin is asking about Gnomon. So the question is, would I happen to know if Gnomon is still doing any field trips for high schools this year? I'm actually not sure. If you're talking about like high school, if you're talking about student high, yes, they're still doing student high. I'm not sure if they take them on. I know that there's a couple classes that they do field trip stuff on, you know, like taking them to studios or to like, you know, one I went to Legacy back in the day when I was a student. And they like showed you around and stuff, and it was super cool and a lot of fun. If you're looking for field trip ideas, you definitely don't need Gnomon. Going to the zoo and all that stuff. I mean, I know I'm pretty sure you're very aware of things like that, but you might be able to find people that are also doing like outreach stuff for tours for just like giving tours, but I'm not entirely sure. But I know Gnomon does have pretty good insides and scoops when it comes to doing field trips and stuff like that to like studios. But if you're talking about just like museums and stuff, then that's, you know, a little different. You can see some of the anatomy getting a little funky, but that's where we can go in, and again, super easy to go in, especially with subdivision levels. I can start sculpting on top of this stuff and moving, you know, moving the neck around to like where it should be. And sculpting this stuff in. Seems like a crazy method at first, but you'll like it once you get into it. And yeah, this is the fun part actually for me as far as anatomy goes, because then this is the part where you get to actually, you know, model and sculpt muscles that are contracting, you know. So for example, you'd want to really bulk up this quad here. And then you'd want to really make sure that this feels super squished. Into there. And kind of merge these. Is there a Comics Legend asking if there's a collectibles course at Gnomon, or do I have a course? I don't, but you should tell Gnomon about that. You know, tell him hire Ashley to give the good old, you know, collectibles course about posing and 3D printing. It actually is something that I've talked about them with in the past because I think it is super fun. The hardest part about it is, I think the whole thing about teaching about how to make collectibles is also talking about the 3D printing making side of it as well, which in that case it would be helpful to have, you know, access to 3D printers and things like that too, to put it into actual practice. So I think that's one of the reasons why they don't have a class like that right now. It's not that it hasn't been discussed in the past, because it definitely has. Because I think it's super fun for students to print their own stuff and, you know, understand that process. But yeah, the hardest thing is the 3D printing side of it. It's super technical too. So I don't know how many people would be super into it, but if you're into it, I don't have a course. Maybe one day I'll make one. It's all about time and how many people would be into it. But yeah, it would be something really cool if they can make it for a Gnomon course. You can see all this pinching and like folding is what's going to bring this sculpt to life. So it's actually starting to get into the habit of, you know, a lot of people I think take sculpting in symmetry for granted and probably don't practice a lot of asymmetrical sculpting, but it's still very much an important use and knowledge to know how to sculpt these muscles when they're contracted and being pushed and pulled in different directions and things like that. And knowing those insertion points and understanding the anatomical structure is what's going to help me make sense of some of the parts that get really messed up. And I think that's the part that's really important about studying your anatomy and, you know, knowing what's going to stretch, what's going to squash, where all these insertion points go, you know, finding where that armpit is, this latissimus dorsi muscle here, to get that all feeling cohesive. A lot of this isn't, I'm not going to spend too much time on doing stuff like this where I'm pinching and pulling some of these things because you can't see it, but you can see how having the separate objects actually is really helpful to create cool insertion points and like proper anatomy stuff. And it also looks really weird with Polypaint sometimes, so make sure that you turn off Polypaint, because you can see that this actually was pretty smooth, but it doesn't look like it because of Polypaint. So you have to go back over in Polypaint and make sure that you're kind of cleaning all these lines up a little bit. But yeah, we can start to get that. And then again on the side, stretch this oblique out. And stretch, and you can see this quad has like some volume, but we can actually shave that volume away now because it's stretching so much into there. And then the quad here is the thing that's probably getting a little tighter. This is probably stretched out a little bit. Or, sorry, not stretched out, but contracted, you know, because it's like as if you're lifting up your ankle, which contracts your calf. Whereas this is getting squished, but it's not being contracted as much. So there's a difference between contraction versus what's getting squished versus what's not getting squished. But yeah, adding nice big squishy lines really sells the idea that this is a organic thing that can move and that there's skin and a bunch of muscle that's going underneath it and all that stuff. So yeah, just doing little things like that actually even help a lot. You know, if he's turning his head, then there's going to be these big muscles like the sternocleidomastoid, and it contracts to turn its head one way. You know, you're going to see that type of stuff. This stuff is going to get stretched more. It would still be there, but it wouldn't be as prominent. And we can go ahead and look at the face. I can lower this and I can, you know, maybe pull up one side of this a bit more. I'll pull up this a little bit too, but I'm gonna pull up one side. And it's the same as like an animation or animating concept where if you pull this up, you need to know that that mass is going somewhere else, which means that this is going to get more volume now, right? So if you're pulling that up, then that also means that this cheek needs to get more volume. Volume and mass just doesn't disappear. It either squashes or moves to another spot, right? So it's important to keep that stuff in mind as well. You can go ahead and maybe add some. Won't really be able to tell, but let's see how it looks as if we had some angry cat. You're not going to be able to see this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But you will see the scrunching of this, right? And then another thing you would probably see is a bit of nostril flare. So we can make these nostrils a little bigger and kind of carve these in a bit more. And then you would see this probably pinching up against it. Right, so you get that snarl. I don't have a muzzle, but I can still snarl and be like, oh, what do I feel, you know, and relate those muscles to that character expression. There's a reason why animators had, you know, mirrors and stuff next to their desk all the time. And most artists do too. So they can like look at a pose or reference something and feel it. You know, another thing to sell this too, if he's like looking one way, is to kind of squint the eyes a bit more, right? So if I squint this eye up a bit more, I can squint this eye too, but it'll give a more menacing kind of vibe. And there's a lot of stretching, right, that would happen here. So I can kind of thin this out a bit. Make sure that that muscle is stretching in the right spot. Yeah, asymmetry helps a lot with this stuff. You can see that my gums aren't quite aligned very nicely, so I can thicken up these gums. I also don't think I've really sculpted on them much, so we can thicken these up. Just add some little ideas of the roof or the mouth or something. Oh, another thing we can do too is we can lift up this tongue. Oops, symmetry's on. And kind of squish it up into the back. And inflate it. Again, the more you're like a little more organic with this stuff, it will help you a lot. And I'm vibing on this music. I like it. You can also mess this up a bit more right now too, and start kind of rounding this out. Kind of adding some irregularities in there. You don't want it to feel like it's a perfectly round tube, because it's not, you know, in reality. So usually it's a little thinner in the middle and they kind of thicken up on the sides. There we go. That's pretty fun too, like looking at it from above. I like that this pulls back and kind of pinches, whereas this one's a little bit more subtle. We could even smooth that out even more. Kind of accentuate that stretch. My dog is talking to me. What do you want? What do you want, little puppy? Oof. So yeah, you can see a lot of the sculpting, especially when it comes to like collectible stuff. A lot of the sculpting will also come after you pose it, because this is the most important position that's going to be in, right? So, you know, when they were asking about, you know, you get approval process from symmetry, and the answer is yes, but then, you know, you do spend a decent amount of time in the posed version of it, tweaking and fixing, and you know, anything that you were like, I should have done that to one side in symmetry, well, you just got to do it twice, you know, because it's easier to just fix that stuff, you know, now just twice than it is to go back and like repose or something. So yeah, it's more about stuff like that. I think my dogs want to go outside again, but I think they just want to go talk to the seal if it's still out there. And then these are looking a little too white, so I think we can do the paintbrush, turn off symmetry. and make these a little darker. Cool. Now let's add that rock in there real quick, and then I might have to call it early if my dogs are going to be a little obnoxious, so sorry, but puppy's call. Oops, I'm rotating instead of scaling this up. That's actually not a bad, yeah, look at that. Okay, I'm done. I did it, guys. Just kidding. So I'm just kind of finding some ledges, figuring out where this placement of these rock formations will be. And then I can go in and I can use this trim curve. It's hiding behind my microphone. Just cut some real quick little things out of it. Oops, wrong way. Just like a basic, I keep going the wrong way. Rock formation, there we go. And then you can just kind of build up kind of randomly. I will also make sure I have Dynamesh turned on. Ooh, that's real heavy. Let's bring that down. That's a little friendlier. Okay. Yeah, we can kind of mess around with this stuff. I'll build out some platformy things, carve out and carve in. Just trying to get random angles, basically. That's all I'm kind of looking for right now. I think the closer he feels like he's crouching, then the better. Way more up here. And then we can go ahead and, well, we can do something like run a clay polish on it and turn up the sharpening on this and do something like that. Done, rock. But we can also go into our light box. If we go to brush, there is something called mallet. If I know the alphabet, mallet. And then you can do mallet fast. And I like this one. It kind of just carves in some cool stuff pretty naturally. Ooh, make sure you Dynamesh. You can get some nice faceting. Sculpting rocks in itself is definitely an art form that takes some practice. At least to get a rock feeling, you know, really nice. But I feel like this is a nice way to kind of start a block in. It's by doing something like this. Haha, Synth was like, Ashley, you rock. And you know what? I appreciate that because I am a fan of puns, so thank you. Can't take it for granted. Hi, puppy. Is there a seal still outside? Look at her looking at me like, oh my god, let me go outside and see the seal, please. It's probably still laying out there. The sun's still out. I don't know. That one doesn't sing Kissed by a Rose, though, so maybe it's not as cool. Oh my god, I carved into the foot, not the tail. Oh, I fixed it. Oof, close one, guys. Okay. If anybody has more rock puns, please throw them my way. It's my favorite. Don't be afraid to tell rock puns. You just gotta get bolder. Ha ha ha. Ha! Get it, guys? You guys get it? Thank you, Sim. Thank you, Sim, for laughing. Really, I should do stand-up comedy. I'm probably much better at that than I am at sculpting, clearly. Then also, I'm just gonna cheat and go to my orb brushes. I've got some cracks in here, I think. Little cracky areas. Probably up the intensity of that. Let's see if I get. Yeah, that's okay. Just kind of following what I already have and just, you know, splitting it up into different stuff. Yeah, there we go. Starting to get there. Starting to get there. And you could always add some cool stuff like doing some plants or something like that too, just to give a bit more. You can also kind of cheat it by you can grab this and you can Control Shift and you can move it around and you can squash it and squish it this way and kind of shift it around and find, you know, other interesting shapes in there. I also like, you can also flatten it a bunch and you can do some like cool kind of like stepping or something. Yeah, we can go to town. Sin says that in Empire Strikes Back they used to use actual potatoes for asteroids. I love it. I love that idea so much. That sounds awesome. But yeah, you know, you can do some stuff like that to add more complexity to things. You don't have to really do that for this because it's, you know, just a rock. But if you're looking to do like actual cool rock environment stuff, then that would be a cool way to just reuse what you already have and then just start kind of building on top, you know? Like if I wanted more of a sculptural statement piece, I could elongate one of these and kind of put it in the back here. Maybe lean it out. Right, so now you have something that's a bit more, feels a lot more organic when you do stuff like that. Kind of move around. And then you'd have to go back in with like the mallet and kind of hack away some stuff to kind of vary it up a bit. But yeah, compositionally, you know, for like a, you know, a maquette or something, you might do something like that. And then you would just cut it flat somewhere, which would be, oops, something like that. You'd also want to go, need room for the tail if the tail is going to be that low. So again, that's stuff to think about when if you're going to make this as a maquette. You know, you might want to grab like a cylinder or something and get a nice wide base. So again, if this was going to be a I'm going to duplicate it. If I was making him a cat. You would probably do something like that. And balance is a really big thing too, you know, making sure you might not put this thing right in the technically what the center is, but maybe a little off-centered, so that way it feels a little bit more natural and stuff. And I think there's a lot of room for, again, these big spikes aren't fitting, so that's where you could either, whoops, symmetry's still on. You could adjust this stuff up a little bit and kind of play with that and deal with some spacing stuff and move some stuff around. That would probably be easier than going back into, you know, full on posing it again. But there we go. I think we have our big cat. Looks pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, we kind of wrapped up a little early, but unfortunately, like I said, I'm a member of one at the moment, so I'm gonna have to probably call it a little early since my dogs are in here being very impatient. Look at this puppy. Look at this puppy being so impatient. Come here. Oh, come here. I was gonna have them say hi, but they don't want to say hi. They're ready to go for their you know what. So, yeah, Thundercats. It does kind of look like a Thundercat. Yeah. Which one is the? Isn't there a green and red one? I'm not crazy. Is there? Oh no, I'm thinking of the. I think I'm thinking of He-Man Tiger, the green tiger. That's what I'm thinking of. But yeah, there we go. So now we have our cool big cat, the big desert cactus cat, the pangolion, whatever it is that you want to call it. I think changing the color was definitely a nice idea. I think it would have been very boring looking if it was just brown, and then it would have been a brown rock. Ugh, who wants to do that? Let's add a little bit of color to our lives. But yeah, so that wraps up the monster archetype. So next week, if you join in, we'll be doing and tackling something different. As always, they make posts in during the week. Yeah, Battle Cat. About possibly what we could be doing next. I'm not really sure. It's kind of always a mystery for me too. So again, these are always really, really fun. But that kind of wraps up our 2 characters from the desert series. You know, we did our desert mech, and then we did our desert cat. So if there's something that you guys have been enjoying watching and stuff, also, you know, tell Gnomon and leave a comment in the archetype stuff when you see it, and they tell me, and, you know, if something's popular, we'll probably just keep doing it. So, yeah, again, thank you guys for tuning in. Sorry I'm dipping out a little 10 minutes early. Hope you forgive me. Thank you. And I hope I will see you guys next week on the next character. So again, this is Archetype, sponsored by Lenovo and AMD. And you guys have a good Tuesday night. Bye.